All right, welcome everyone. We're just a few minutes away from starting our Global Alliance webinar, Demystifying DEI, Looking into the Future. We see that many of you are already joining us. Thank you so much. Please make sure that your audio is working, and if you experience any technical issues, please use the chat function to let us know, and our support team will be happy to assist you. In the meantime, please settle down as we will be starting our program in a few moments. Again, thank you so much for being here.
The Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management is the confederation of the world's major PR and communication management associations, institutions and training organizations representing over 360,000 practitioners and academics across 126 countries worldwide.
A not-for-profit organization with 6 regional offices across the world, Global Alliance relies on the voluntary efforts and commitment of communication professionals to tackle common problems with a global perspective.
The Global Alliance's mission is to unify the public relations profession, raise professional standards all over the world, share knowledge for the benefit of its members, and be the global voice for public relations in the public interest.
By partnering with regional, national and international bodies to increase professionalism in public relations and communication management, this alliance works to enhance the collaborative competence of the industry among its constituents around the world.
Global Alliance is at the forefront of the representation of PR and communication management as a profession in which the importance of ethical behavior is unquestionable. The development of a global protocol on ethics for public relations and the requirement that all Global Alliance members ratify it demonstrates this commitment to integrity.
The Global Alliance's vision is to enhance the role and value of public relations and communication management to organizations and to global society. We pursue this vision by convening and serving the profession, helping to find universal principles that unite our professional organizations and their members, while embracing diversity, inclusion and equality that enables a greater understanding within our global community.
Joining Global Alliance gives you the opportunity to engage with the world's communication professionals with free access to over 1,000 education, training and development programs, together with discounts from member conferences and organizations around the world.
The World Public Relations Forum, regional conferences, workshops and the Global PR and Communication Awards.
Network with world leaders, global members, and keep up to date on world trends, insights, international research projects, and employment opportunities with Global Alliance's digital bulletins and monthly newsletter.
Benchmark your training needs with Global Alliance's Capabilities Framework. Access the PRSA Learning Platform and the Museum of PR, the world's first online history of public relations of our member organizations.
Expand your knowledge, personal development and professionalism with free access to Global Alliance's Public Relations and Communication Model and the Approaching the Future annual reports.
Extensive free access to monthly focused programs such as ethical standards and best practice, education, training and development resources, global trends and communication transformation, diversity, equality and inclusion, health and well-being, celebrating the best of public relations and communications, student and young practitioner, and public relations and technology, among others.
Join universities, institutes and their graduates from around the world by securing the highest global public relations and communication accreditation qualification recognized worldwide.
Set professional standards with the global principles of ethical practice in PR and communication management and be informed with the Global Communications Report. Global Alliance in partnership supports the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals.
Join our Global Alliance Board, World Commission on Ethical Standards in Public Relations and Communications, or one of our 6 regional councils, Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, Middle East, South Asia, Latin America, and North America.
So now you know. Go global, be global, and join Global Alliance.
So welcome to Demystifying Diversity, Equality, and Inclusion, Looking into the Future, a special webinar brought to you by the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communications Management. As we heard in the video we just played, my name is Irene Lungu Chipili. I'm president of the Zambia Institute for Public Relations and Communication and a member of the Global Alliance board. I'm the chairperson of the DEI month, which we are celebrating this month. And every June, we celebrate diversity, equality, and inclusion as Global Alliance. And in honor of this initiative, we are hosting this insightful webinar, which seeks to highlight innovative current strategies and DEI in DEI across the globe. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Allow me at this point to welcome our moderator for this webinar. And we are joined today by Anna PISTA, APRA founder and CEO of Ardent Communications and Premier Technology Agency from the Philippines, moderating this session. With her, she brings a deep expertise and unwavering commitment to advancing DEI in practice. Anna is perfectly poised to guide our discussion with today's distinguished global experts that are joining us in this webinar. So welcoming Ms. Anna Pista as our moderator for this webinar. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you very much, Irene. It's a pleasure. Thank you for that good introduction. Good evening, everyone from the Philippines, and good morning, good afternoon, or good night, wherever you are joining us from around the world. I am absolutely delighted and excited to be with you today, moderating this very important conversation, Demystifying DEI, Looking into the Future. This webinar is truly a highlight of the Global Alliance Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Month celebration, and I'm so pleased you could all join us. Before we dive into our expert discussions, let's consider what diversity, equity, and inclusion truly mean. DEI incorporates the synergistic relationship, philosophy, and culture of acknowledging, embracing, supporting, and accepting those with different differentiators such as race, gender, religion, and socioeconomic backgrounds. DEI is used to describe three values that many organizations today strive to embody to help meet the needs of people from all walks of life. Tonight, we look forward to exploring how organizations globally have implemented DEI initiatives and tackle challenges of creating more inclusive and diverse spaces in PR. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our incredible panel of global experts whose insights will be invaluable to our discussion today. First, joining us from Canada, we have Ms. Priya Bates of Strategic Communication Management Professional, or SCMP. Priya is a specialist in internal communication, DEI, and change management. She is also an award-winning professional communicator with a passion for driving strong performance. Among her vast works includes a book on building a culture of inclusivity, effective internal communication for diversity, equity, and inclusion, co-authored by Ms. Advita Patel. Priya, welcome. Next, from India, we have Ms. SHREYA KRISHNAN. SHREYA is the managing director of AnitaB.org India, where she plays a pivotal role in advancing gender diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. Known for her impactful leadership, she has co-hosted several Grace Hopper celebrations in India and the US, furthering her commitment to supporting women in technology. Before her current role, SHREYA served as EVP Marketing and Communications at Aon India. Her extensive expertise spans CSR, corporate grooming, and strategic communications, and she is a skilled NLP practitioner and Gestalt master therapist, bringing a unique blend of psychological insight and professional acumen to her work. Shreya's influence extends beyond the corporate world. She serves on the advisory boards of 8 organizations and 7 NGOs, contributing her expertise to a wide range of causes. Additionally, she is a champion of inclusion and diversity, and she recently co authored the book Words Matter, focusing on empowering language for girls. Shreya, welcome. And finally, joining us from Nigeria, we are honored to have Dr. OMONIYI IBIETAN. Dr. IBIETAN is a strategic communications consultant and a stakeholder manager with over 24 years of experience in leading top shelf brand, media, and communication strategies in the public and NGO sector. He is the General of the African Public Relations Association, or APRA. He has also authored over 19 publications, including a book titled Social Media, Social Demography, and Voting Behavior in Nigeria, published in 2023. Dr. Iviatan is a strong advocate for DEI as an organizing principle, stressing that, like justice, DEI must be actively lived and seen to be done, not merely proclaimed. He views it as an essential for fostering belongingness and achieving collective goals. Dr. Iviatan, it's great to have you here with us. And thank you all for being here. We're privileged to have your expertise with us today. We have a fascinating lineup, and each of our speakers will be sharing their personal insights into DEI and specifically why diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion is so important in the PR and communication industry today. Each speaker will be allocated approximately 10 minutes to present their perspectives, and then we'll start with Priya, followed by Shreya, and then Dr. Abitan. Priya will present the 6 R's of DEI: rights, representation, recruitment, retention, result, and reputation, linking DEI to business performance. SHREYA will explore the broad scope of DEI, including disability and generational diversity and cognitive diversity. She will use the storyline to illustrate DEI impact. And last but not the least, Dr. Iviatan will articulate how DEI as an enforceable policy and legal issue is fundamental to the sustainability of societies and organizations, emphasizing its role in fostering belongingness and achieving organizational goals. After all our speakers have shared their insights, we will open the floor for Q&A session where we'll delve deeper into your questions. So, Priya, let's start with you. The floor is yours.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm coming in from Toronto, Canada, and I'm excited to be part of this conversation with these amazing panelists. I'm really looking forward to the conversation we have afterwards. But here's where I want to start, and it's a good place to start. A few years ago, I co-authored a book with Advita Patel called Building a Culture of Inclusivity, Effective Internal Communications for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And that's available on Amazon audiobook as well. So feel free to take a look for that. And we really wanted to give a guideline for communication professionals, especially internal comms professionals who were taking on the DEI mandate in a lot of their organizations here in North America and around the world. And the one thing we really wanted to start with was establishing the foundation of your DEI program in organizations. And that's what we call the DEI why. And it's really establishing the why. And what's been really interesting over the last year and few years with the backlash on DEI that we're experiencing, especially here in North America, is that what I see and I observe is those that have a strong DEI why are really are the ones who are sticking with DEI. They're standing behind their programs and their processes and their policies because they know why it matters to the organization. So let me go through the 6 R's. I really like alliteration. It's a bit of a problem for me. But let's start with rights. When we look at rights, we deliver DEI because it's the right thing to do, but it's also, we often start with compliance. So wherever you are in the world, we want to have an understanding of what are the compliance rights? What are the things that we believe in? And what are the things we have to do from an organizational perspective? And that's different everywhere in the world. So really truly understanding the rights that your organization needs to comply with in order to start building the why in your organization. We then move to representation. And when we talk about representation, we talk about 3 things. You want to look at the representation of the employees on your front lines, the customers who buy your products, and the communities in which you operate. And then what we want to see is that representation rise through the ranks of your organization. So you're going to be looking at that representation in order to ensure that you're driving the innovation and the ideas and the decisions with a group that actually represents your target markets. We focus on recruitment. Recruitment is attracting people to your organization. And what's interesting with recruitment is as organizations and leaders take a look at the future of recruitment, what they're expecting with Gen Z, is it Gen Z or Z, depending on where you're from? We say Z in Canada. When they're looking at Gen Z and they're looking at Alpha that comes up behind them. We heard recently, I was at the IABC conference in Vancouver, and we heard that these new generations are expecting you to focus on DEI. They're looking at your organization. They're looking for diversity. That's the peers that they work with globally. They want to see organizations that are progressive. If they look at an organization and they see traditional, they think that that organization is behind, not looking forward. You're looking at retention. You're going to hear a lot about belonging and inclusion later. And retention, it's a little harder in an employer's market, but when it comes, we will go back to an employee's market. And what you'll know about your programs, what if they stuck and they didn't, is when employees start leaving you. And I will say this to a lot of organizations: when people start leaving you, it's your worst employee, it's your best employees that leave you. So those employees you want to stay, when you're not creating the culture that you want to create, you want to focus on those retention numbers. Reputation. One of the things that's really interesting with when you establish your DEIY is I talked to an organization recently that realized that about 75 to 80% of their reputational challenges, their crises that went on in the media and PR, were usually founded in a DEI issue. And so I think that there's a really important part of understanding when you have those crises, how many of those are connected to DEI, and how do you avoid them in the first place by creating the right policies and programs and things for your organization. And then finally, we believe that when you get DEI right, when people feel like they belong, when they feel included, when they're part of your future strategy and they feel that they're valued, you actually get the results. I can't imagine employees who are seeing organizations, businesses fall back on DEI because of the backlash. I can't imagine that what they're getting is productivity from those employees, because when employees think you don't care, they question whether they need to care. And that has direct impacts on your service and your business. So that's the DEIY in a nutshell. I wanted to give you, it's explained a lot further in the book, but I just wanted to give you a good starting point. I believe that every organization, when they're involved in their DEI program, should be having this conversation. They should be setting KPIs against this conversation. And then when they have that, what we get is real performance versus the performative checkbox exercises that tend to create noise versus results. So with that, I'm going to help you move on to the next I think is the next speaker, Anna, or is that correct?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, but it's important that you stress on people need to belong, people need to be included, people need to be valued. Therefore, there's productivity that is struck into us, especially the company owners. Thank you, Priya, for that incredibly insightful discussion on the importance of the 6 R's in DEI and its impact on internal communications and organizational culture. We'll get back to you later.
Absolutely.
And now we will move on to SHREYA. SHREYA, please share your thoughts with us.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much. Thank you, Priya, for setting the stage and the tone and the tenor for what's to follow and ensue. I think one of the most important things about understanding the difference between D, E, and I is something that we need to look ahead into. When you look at diversity, what does diversity mean, right? We're not only talking about gender diversity, we're talking about generational diversity, we're talking about mindset diversity, we're talking about identities, race, ages, backgrounds, what kind of optimists, pessimists, etc. do you have at the table? Because the more diverse your team is, the more ability for the teams to be able to function better, be more productive is very, very important. Now that's diversity. Without inclusion, diversity is just a statistic because you can have as diverse a team as you want, but if it's not a safe space, if it's not a space that encourages dialogue and encourages healthy conflict, you're going to end up with a lot of silent voices at the table, and the diversity that you have as a statistic is really not going to help move the needle, right? So what is equity in the E is the idea of building that inclusion through creating fair treatment, to giving everybody the same kind of access and advancement. I'll take it a step further and talk about when we say equality, we're referring to equal playing fields. When we say equity, we're saying it's not one size fits all. Imagine you go to a bowling alley and you have only one size of shoes, and everybody needs to wear the same pair of shoes. It's not going to help. The reason why we need different pairs of shoes to fit different sizes of feet is exactly the idea of equity, by creating that size that we're able to give to each person that fits their capability and their capacity. And that's the extension of equity into social justice, right? So when you look at inclusion, you're intentionally creating the safe environment. You're intentionally creating a space where everybody feels heard, seen, valued, respected. So that's the texture of DEI, and that's where I want us to focus on a little bit. Now, there's enough research to show that DEI has given us an angle of productivity. Companies that invest in DEI are a lot more profitable. It is one of the SDGs that we speak about. It is also the S in the ESG piece that we speak of, because it's the social segment of DEI, which actually segues into the ESG conversation as well. Now, why is this important? There's, of course, more creativity. There's, of course, more engagement and satisfaction. And I'll give you an example very shortly. It also, from a performance perspective, creates and produce products and services for the diaspora of the community that these organizations are focusing on. It also aligns with ethical, social, customer expectations. So you're able to cater to a wider angle, right? So let me take an example. There was an organization that was building Oculuses, the ones that you wear when you're gaming, or it's an Oculus that you put on, and they weren't doing exactly very well. Then there was a woman who was brought into the testing table, and she happened to have curly hair, and the Oculus just didn't fit her head or her hair. So there was a design problem that was fundamentally the issue, which had not been notified. And a lot of people have curly hair. When you look at the segmentation of the number of people with curly hair, you automatically recognize what a huge chunk of the population you've left behind and not addressed, right? So when you look at application of DI across sectors, like Priya referred to some of it, whether it's hiring or promotion or cultures that actually build and create this intentionally, there's also the whole idea of inclusion with allyship, which is how do you create allies within the ecosystem? And this could be LGBTQIA plus allies, it could be gender allies, it could be allies for the disabled communities. So that automatically is about education and awareness, and how do you create that and help build that? And understanding privilege is a very important aspect of that. When you look at healthcare, there are enough examples to show why gender is not represented there. There is no equitable access to care. I can give you several examples of how There is very little research even today that's done on anything beyond women's reproductive health, especially with bone health, heart health, cardiovascular health. And there's a whole plethora of information out there of how healthcare is very limited when it comes to that. So you can imagine how much more complex it is as you look at more intersections of diversity. Also, from a government policy, representation, and community perspective, it's very important for organizations to look at applying this from a very intentional perspective. Moving ahead, when you look at success stories, there are fantastic success stories of how DEI has helped organizations. And here are 3 examples. Microsoft's autism hiring program, which looked at neurodivergence. And so many of us are neurodivergent and we don't even realize, right? The sheer number of neurodivergent people in the world. So the hiring program is catered to specifically bring on board neurodiverse talent. Salesforce used the same for regular pay equity assessments and transparency to ensure that they had a very level playing field across genders and generations. Unilever reduced the gender representation, it reduced its problems with gender representation and leadership by intentionally bringing it a 50-50 mechanics for them to bring DEI successfully into the boardroom. So there are also stories of failure, and that we'll speak of several examples, and these are all great organizations have learned, but these are examples for us to look into. So moving to the next slide, there are several examples of how DEI has had issues. Google had a walkout in 2018 where there was a disconnect between values and actions, and they did a lot of work to actually bring that back into fore, and it was a core, leadership context. There was an ad controversy that Pepsi had because of a diversity gimmick that was almost used for selling, and that really caused a lot of trouble to the brand. We all know as reputational professionals how important it is for that to not happen. Superficial DEI training, which does not lead to long-term impact. Death by PowerPoint doesn't essentially mean you have created an inclusive work environment. Moving into the next piece, which is, again, a look at how we have to look at inclusion first and not diversity first. When you build inclusion, there are a lot of things that happen when you bring diverse talent that makes it more meaningful and sustainable. Without inclusion, diverse hires are not exactly, it's that quote which says you're invited to the party, but can you dance at the party like no one's watching? That's inclusion, the idea of feeling seen and celebrated even. Also, from a psychological safety perspective, when you're able to create that environment, automatically retention goes up. So these are all reasons why it has to be an inclusion-first framework. Let's move ahead. When you look ahead, what are the things that we can do as organizations and professionals? One is we need data. We need to look at our data, and each region behaves differently. India has various nuances of diversity which don't essentially apply in other regions, and we often take an approach of a very Western world approach to DEI, which needs more layers. Leadership accountability is very, very essential. This has to be driven up top for an inclusive culture to really be crafted. There has to be focus on intersectionality because we all have multiple identities and they all need to be seen, valued, and even allowed to coexist. There is a systemic change that's required in the way we speak. Discrimination is very latent. Understanding privilege is an important aspect of that. And when you look at adapting DEI for remote and hybrid environments, that becomes even more nuanced because that needs a lot more intentionality to bring to the fore. So I think that wraps us up towards the last segment, which is committing to ongoing learning. All of us have a lot to learn. We all don't know or understand a lot of the nuances of various communities that we are around. We have to embed this into policies, leadership, and culture, which means that there is a lot of work that we can do as reputation communication professionals. We have to measure because anything that does not go well measured cannot be well articulated, and there needs to be transparency that's built in. And one of the most important things of DEI is empathy, for us to be able to build deep empathy and courage to lead from the front and to really show up in a manner that says, we don't know enough. We need to learn better. We need to do better. And that requires compassion, and that's how you can lead. So yeah, that is my bit.
All
Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you so much, Shreya. it's really important that we build a better future with DEI. And your 4 key takeaways, I would like to take a photo of the slide because I wanted to actually immediately share it. Thank you for that, Shreya. Thank you for that compelling presentation and for highlighting the role of DEI in addressing disability, generational diversity, cognitive diversity, and the move that we need to take, the steps that we need to take moving further. So now, I'd like to call Dr. IBIETAN. Please enlighten us with your insights from the African and global communications perspective. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Anna. I mean, I'm so fascinated by the presentation that PRIYA and SHREYA have made. And I will start by saying that I adopt entirely what they have presented because it's in context, it's factual, it's evidence-based, is the way to go, you know. And I like to let you know that first and foremost, I'm a social rights activist. You can't be a social political rights activist without believing in DEI. I mean, it's just so intrinsic. I'm Nigerian, you know, and I live in a diverse society. Over 300 ethnic groups and over 500 languages. If you do not believe in DEI, you will not be able to live in such a society. I'm sure PRIYA and SHREYA will agree with me. I mean, living in also very diverse societies themselves. So my thesis, it's very clear. You know, DEI shouldn't be an optional thing. You know, and it goes beyond the question of just morality. It underpins sustainability. It is foundational to our existence. It shows capacity to survive the future if you adopt DEI. It is just as basic. Because from the definitional conceptions that PRIYA and SHREYA have given, we can see what it means to have a diverse space, what it means to have equity, which is about fairness and justice, what it means also to have people included. For me, it doesn't matter whether inclusion comes first or diversity comes first, there must be a connection of the three. And that's why I said it is not a moral choice. It is something that should be enforceable. Now, that takes me to the next slide. You know, so enforceability is imperative, you know, and I mean, we can't run away from it. So I will advocate for having legal and policy framework that should make us to be able to enforce it. I mean, not to make it optional, you know, or persuasive, because if we do so, it then means that people have options. So deriving from where I took off from, we should not make it optional because it is foundational to existence. It makes society and cohesion to be sustainable. It is important for us to enforce it if we really want to see peace, you know, and harmonious coexistence that we all preach. So I mean, we should go beyond rhetoric to please make sure that this is enforceable. And that takes me to the next slide. You know, so it's at the heart of belongingness, it's a fundamental need of man to believe in diversity, to practice equity, to practice inclusion. I made reference to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, Maslow is a leading humanistic psychology who's talked about needs of man that are important for survival. In those needs, even in the original 5 classifications, in the middle of it is the need for love and belongingness. So it's just important that embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, you are telling other people that they belong. And so if you do so, people will be able to put in their best in what they do organizationally and even nationally. And if you look at the speakings, you know, of Martin Luther King Jr., his notion of community, underpinning it is a question of expressing love and belongingness. You cannot say to people that you love them if you do not include them in the processes of governance, in the processes that shapes their life in a qualitative sense. So to make people to be committed to organizational values, to make people to be able to give in their best to their nations. They must be seen to be part of that nation. So from the philosophical and theoretical foundation, or from that basis, you know that to preach love, to exhibit belongingness, to show that people are valued, is the best way for you to rally them around an organizational goal that all have to pursue. And then that takes me to the next slide. Now, so when we look at it, the need to be fair to people, the need to make people to be involved in what they do simply means that you are trying to do what? To achieve harmony, to achieve cohesion. Those are your pathways to peace. If you do not have a peaceful space, you cannot achieve anything. So diversity, as my colleagues have said earlier, will speak to coexistence of diverse people, that constitute a space. Equity will speak to fairness. Inclusion will be demonstrating that everybody has a stake and involving them in deciding what is happening at every level, including from recruitment, where you give opportunity to people who have been disadvantaged to be able to be accommodated in workspace. And so to the next slide now. So now I do the parallel that, look, like the saying that justice must not just be done, but be seen to have been done. Implementing DEI must go beyond philosophy and sloganeering. We need it to be practical. We need it to be seen from everyday activity of organizations. And for us as PR people, it is more imperative. People must be involved. Organizations, individuals, and society must live the idea. If any organization needs to be seen as embracing peace, as preaching peace, and committing to peace, it must implement DEI. So that is the point. I mean, it must be evident and actionable, not just something that we look at as a philosophy. And that takes me to the next slide, which looks at the question of PR as public relations and communication management people. Because our focus is in building understanding, shaping perceptions, and ethical issues, as well as reputation management, it is necessary, it is compulsory that we embrace DEI, because you cannot build understanding when there is no basis for belongingness, when there is no love and there is no diversity in a workplace or in an organizational setting. And we also must drive this based on cases that we have seen. And I'm glad that SHREYA actually brought out some evidence that can really back up my own thesis. So for PR professionals, it is very crucial that because we try to build goodwill and improve on reputation and improve on perception, we must make sure there is harmony in workplace, there must be cohesion, there must be peaceful relationship, and communication is the fundamental basis for all this, because it is through communication that you build relationship and demonstrate leadership effectiveness. So these are very foundational. Can I see the next slide, please? So for us to be able to talk about growth and development, there is a need for us to embrace holistically, from the point of view of policy and law to the question of recruitment and our do's and don'ts, including standard operating procedure manuals of organizations must demonstrate commitment to DEI. That is the way in which employees will be forced to embrace DEI and live it as a way of life, because you must live DEI if really you want to achieve the purpose of harmony and cohesion. And so, of course, for advanced societies, it is important. In the global arena, we see the imperative of unity. In places where we have had wars, it is simply because people have some sense of deprivations and there is failure of communication, of conversational capacity to move on, and then it results in war. So you use DEI to build credibility, to build trust, and to give long-term relevance to what you do. So this is fundamentally the point. I think this is about the last slide. Otherwise, I mean, I want to thank you for listening to me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. IBIETAN, for underscoring the critical need to truly live DEI, not just as a concept, but as an enforceable policy essential for societal harmony and growth. So there are so many things that were shared by our great experts here. So I'll go directly to the questions. I think it's best that we ask two questions for each with based on what you presented. So I'd go first to Miss Priya. Priya, your 6 R's concept for building a DEI culture sounds very comprehensive. Could you elaborate on which of the 6 R's you believe is the most challenging for organizations to effectively implement and what initial step they can take to overcome that challenge? I think you're on mute.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to be on mute while everybody else was talking, but I think the biggest challenge, like all of them are things that are opportunities and are measurable. And that's what we tried to create is metrics that can be created from those 6 R's, the DEIY, from an organizational perspective. But what we're looking for initially, we see what we see is representation, and representation seems to be the first step. So I feel like when we get to representation, the other things happen. And remember, when I talk representation, it's not a checkbox exercise. It's really understanding your audiences, really understanding who matters to your organization. And when you start there, and that's the one thing I struggle with, that people kind of ignore what they see and then do. I even look at when I was looking at Global Alliance and showcasing North America leadership. It's not representative of North Americans. And that's like, we need to live our own values, walk our talk before we ask others to.
Okay. Very well taken. Representation. I have to remember all the R's. I have another question for you, Priya. Given the focus on internal communication and organizational culture, how do the 6 R's specifically help in fostering open and honest dialogue about DEI, especially when addressing sensitive or uncomfortable topics within a company?
The key for me in any program that I'm providing is we start with data. Right. And again, when I talk about that is when we start with data, when we start with the research that we're doing to talk about future trends, which leaders do anyway. They do that from understanding the trends and generations and what are the next customers going to want? What do women want versus men want? Who are our customers? If we start with our data, then we can start telling a story about what the data's telling us, right? So the data can be translated into why this is important. And once we get people's heads around that, it makes a really big difference.
Thank you, Priya. Actually, I think Shreya stressed that also in one of the slides, So Shreya, this question is for you. Your approach to illustrating the impact of DEI through storytelling is fascinating. Can you share an example of a story you've used that effectively shifted perceptions or inspired action regarding disability inclusion, and what made that particular story so powerful? Because you presented some case studies, but this particular one on disability, can you share us that one?
So, oftentimes we assume that because people are in a wheelchair or because people are blind, there is a certain sense of privilege that comes as allies that we extend. And very often, when you ask people who are either on a wheelchair or who are blind or disabled, they will tell you that they just want a functioning ecosystem. They want to ensure that, there are walkways that are built for them. They want to ensure that if there are deaf people in the room in a conference, there's somebody who's doing the sign language conversation, right? So it's very far removed from the reality that we assume as people. Like I injured my foot for about a good 3 months, and I was first on a wheelchair, then I was in a crutch. And I remember the world changed for me. even where you look, right? For instance, when you're sitting in a wheelchair, what is at your eye level is so different from when you're standing up and when you're able to walk. And until you experience it, until I personally experienced it, I didn't know what it was like. And that really changes the way you look, everything from the arm strength you need to navigate to the, dependency that you have on somebody to help you while you have to continue to respect yourself as an individual is a very, very tall order. Right. So when you look at discrimination, it's not just overt, it's also very unassuming, not very seen. It's also the whole, I'm better than you kind of an approach that happens very unconsciously, right? That's our unconscious bias stepping in. And I think it's very important that we really design by ensuring if we don't have those people in the room to at least bring them into focus groups when we're building products or services or creating policies to ensure that they are represented. And Priya spoke about representation, and that's why it's so important. Because until you experience it, you cannot know what it feels like to be or, to deal with what comes with that particular life path. It could be LGBTQIA, it could be an older person, it could be disabled, it could be neurodivergent. It is so important to remember that we know nothing, right, until we are one of them. And that's the first step to allyship. Allyship is not a power equation. Allyship is a circle, holding hands, standing together and saying, what can we do to make this better?
Yeah, that's right. I think, yeah, that's very powerful. SHREYA, I have another question.
Yes.
You mentioned the role of DEI in addressing generational and cognitive diversity. How can organizations specifically leverage storytelling, bridge gaps, and foster understanding between different generations and cognitive styles within their workforce? Because this is always the challenge of communications practitioners. Yeah.
Right. So, for instance, how a neurodivergent person, I myself have, hyper-functioning ADHD, and it's taken me a long time to figure out how I would like to consume information or how I would like to interact. And very often it's because we ourselves don't know. So, like Priya said, there's not enough data, there's not enough awareness. So, first and foremost, it's to make ourselves aware of what does cognitive behavior look like amongst neurodivergent people. What does it look like for different generations? What is it for a young leader to navigate the world of having people who are older to them on a team? And what does that discrimination look like? The same in reverse. What is it like for an older leader, a baby boomer, to be perceived a certain way because they can't, like, we assume that people who are older don't know technology, but there are so many people who will beat you at your own tech game. So, what are some of these preconceived notions that we can consciously break without approaching an object or a situation or a circumstance with our preconceived notions and assumptions? But how can we approach it about it being the other person and ask them? Very often, the simplest thing to do is to ask without assuming. And this cuts across gender and it cuts across all of this. But with neurodivergence, I think it's first about awareness. It's about understanding how different people would like to consume information differently. It's about giving room for different people to work in different ways, especially with virtual working worlds, right? Having working hours where you can probably just huddle in a room on a Zoom room and just do your own work. Nobody's talking. There's just either music playing or, people are just sitting there, and accountability partnerships help in ADHD, right? So hiring autistic people is a very different skill because autistic people are phenomenally talented. And, again, how do you create an environment that's safe for them where they don't have to socially interact with the pressures in the world? These are all nuances that you need to bring in the psychologist, you need to bring in the expert, you need to bring the representation of the people that you have. And that is when you start really building it with them and not for them.
Yeah, thank you, Shreya. You're talking from the heart. So it's really, easier to understand how to go about this for communications practitioners listening. So thank you for that. So I also have two questions for Dr. IBIETAN. You guys could have the whole hour discussing these things and we can learn a lot from you. So I'm just, picking the pieces immediately so I could throw you questions immediately. For Dr. IBIETAN, you emphasize that commitment to DEI is crucial for organizational sustainability and not just an option or a moral issue. From your African and global communications perspective, um, what are some of the most significant long-term risks or negative consequences organizations face if they fail to genuinely embrace DEI as a core policy?
Thank you so much, Anna, and I've listened also very well to my colleagues, PRIYA and SHREYA. I mean, fantastic presentations there. You talk about significant long-term risk. First and foremost, I mean, I don't think any entity will love to be in perpetual crisis. One of the risks that you face in not genuinely implementing DEI is to be in perpetual crisis, in the sense that internally, you are not able to achieve cohesion of internal stakeholders, which is very fundamental organizationally. For you to be able to satisfy your external stakeholder, there must be unity of your internal stakeholders. So there's a problem of moving from one crisis to another because of failure of social cohesion. Because DEI enables you to achieve social cohesion. Cohesion is required for you to move on. No general is going to move into a war if the battalion that he guides are divided. So that is why it is so central. So the centrality of implementing DEI cannot be, overemphasized, from the point of view of ensuring harmony, peace, and, cohesion. You move from there to do what? To achieve your bottom line as an entity. Let's look typically of organizations that are into sales. And then you are operating in an environment that is diverse. But your organization is peopled with those who are basically from a particular, ethnicity or nationality. But you are approaching a diverse audience. How do you want to convince your audience that you have their interests at heart if you have, a sort of monolithic, configuration of people? I need to emphasize this, Anna. If you have to deal with the question of gender as an example, I mean, I know my colleagues have made reference to neurodivergent people, which is very central. But look at the question of gender, which has been a problematic for a long time. When I talk about enforcement, when I talk about DEI being seen to have been done, not just a philosophy, I speak to evident assessment, data-based of assessment of implementation. The fact that you are a lady, Anna, does not mean that you are going to be an advocate for women. If you have an orientation that is paternalistic, that believes in the superiority of men, you will find yourself in an organization where you will still be preaching patriarchal issues and women are abandoned. That's why I'm saying in detail, to every detail, we must ensure that DEI is being implemented. It transcends representation. It includes the qualitative voice that is representational, of those who have been disadvantaged. So these are some of the risks that we face if we refuse to implement DEI. We live in a fractious society. We live in very disharmonious organization, and you are unable to achieve your purpose as an entity, as a going concern. I'd like to stop there.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was so passionate of you to stress that, Dr. IBIETAN. And I think Miss Priya also emphasized on the representation part. And I think this is really very important. I have one last question for you, and then I'll ask everyone the same question one last time. Considering DEI as an enforceable policy essential for societal harmony and growth, okay. What practical steps can organizations take to ensure that their DEI policies are not just written statements, but are truly lived and integrated into every level of their operations with the clear accountability mechanisms? I think all of you can answer this.
That's good. I know that our time is fast spent, and I'm going to be very brief. So I allow my colleagues to be able to have input. You see, there must be a demonstrable commitment by the leadership. that is non-negotiable because it's the leadership that drives organizational values, okay? So leaders must commit themselves to implementation. That's just so basic. Now, another thing that I think is very important is that because it's a value that we cherish. If we preach DEI as a value that is cherishable, we must incentivize those who demonstrate commitment to implementing DEI. Staff in an organization should be rewarded, should be given awards, should be honored for demonstrating commitment to the implementation in what they do from one level to another. So I'm going to stop there so I allow SHREYA and PRIYA to also make some final contribution.
That's right. Priya, your take on this one? Can organizations take to ensure that their DEI policies are not just written statements, but are truly lived and integrated in every level of their operations?
Yeah, and I agree, you know, that it really is about embedding, right? So you start with leadership, you start with our values and strategy, values and action, strategy and action, and ensuring that those programs, policies, practices are embedded into the everyday of the organization. Not, I say it's about campaign, it's not about campaigns, it's about conversations that happen. It's about everyday experiences from an employee perspective, because that's my audience. And it's also, you know, think about this, you know, we talked about unity. Unity is not about agreement because we want diversity, you know, it's about alignment. And that's what we're trying to drive, is its alignment with those values and strategies that present themselves very different in different parts of the world and with different customers. But what we want to make sure that that foundation that connects us is the same, and that we use our skills and our variety and diversity to address it to different audiences.
Thank you so much, Priya. That was so insightful. I agree with you. About SHREYA, do you have a take on this?
I think it's important to check in. I don't think anything is written in stone. I think when you take on a charter, you should be able to make it something that you measure at the end of 6 months and see what the data is telling you, what the numbers are telling you, how the needle has moved. What are people saying? I think listening is one of the most important things across the cross section of the organization for us to do when we implement DEI. It's about listening to the stories, because the stories never lie. It's about how the security guard at the door feels when you walk in. It's about everybody who's part of that culture. And when you create an intentional, beautiful culture where you're able to celebrate each human being for what they bring, minus their gender, their generation, all of that, remove all of that. Celebrate them for the unique essence that they bring because you hired them in the first place, and then measure it and apply the data and then do all of the policies and procedures and all of that. But I think the fundamental thing is empathetic leadership that really drives it. So.
Wow, thank you so much for that insightful answer also, SHREYA. We lack time. It's already 9 o'clock. And as we draw to a close, I still have 4 more questions here, but I'm really sorry that we have to beat the time. As we draw to a close, it's clear from our discussions today that while the journey of DEI is ongoing, significant progress is being made globally. We've explored how organizations are increasingly integrating DEI into their systems, moving it beyond a mere buzzword to a core strategic imperative that is being taken seriously across industries. Our esteemed speakers have offered invaluable insights into the practicalities, immense benefits, and persistent challenges of the vital work. They've underscored that commitment to DEI isn't just an option or a moral issue. It truly underpins the foundation of sustainability for societies and organizations. Like the notion of justice, DEI must be actively lived and seen to be done, not merely a slogan or philosophical framework. That is really true. A key takeaway from our conversation is the profound power of communication is shaping our world. The words we choose, the narratives we create, and even the subtle nuances in our language can either perpetuate old biases or champion new inclusive realities. This highlights the critical importance of fostering gender-responsive communication and other intentional communication practices as center pillars of ethical PR. It means being deliberate, questioning stereotypes, and actively creating spaces where all voices are not just heard, but empowered. Language isn't merely a reflection of culture, it is a powerful driver of change. Ultimately, it has been underscored today that DEI is not just a corporate checkbox. It is fundamentally a communication imperative. In a world where public trust can be fragile and attention spans are really short, inclusive and intentional communication is key to building credibility, fostering genuine connection, and maintaining cultural relevance. The collective effort to shape global communication standard must ensure no one is left behind in the conversation that define our culture. Thank you to our incredible speakers, Ms. PRIYA Bates, SHREYA KRISHNAN, and Dr. OMONIYI IBIETAN for sharing your invaluable wisdom and making this such an enlightening session. And to our audience, thank you for joining us today from around the world and for your commitment to fostering a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future for public relations worldwide. On behalf of the Global Alliance for Public Relations and Communication Management, I'm Anna Pista, and it has been an absolute pleasure moderating this session. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.